Hey, this is Zach Lugg the Great, and I am here tonight with Frank Luke.
Hello.
And and Matt Cochran.
Good evening.
And we are getting together to talk about C.S. Lewis's somewhat unusual Christmas poem, "The Turn of the Tide," which you have to infer a little bit to get to Christmas, but it is there. Before we go any further, I should have checked this earlier. Frank, are there any projects you wanted to mention for everybody?
Yeah. Hey. In the Shoot the Devil 3, my story, A House Divided, appeared. That's the second of my High Frontier stories to be published. The first one was in Shoot the Devil 2. That was A Ship Without a Sail, and it is a light sci-fi. Think Star Trek, but with a more jingoistic Federation. And the focal character of these 6 planned short stories for this cycle is a chaplain, which brings a little bit of a difference to it.
Okay. Have you read what is it? Hyperspace Demons by Jonathan Moeller, by the way? That was one of the first science fiction spaceship stories I've read where there's a chaplain on board, and I'm like, yes! Why? What? It never noticed this before, but that's a problem. Anyway, so having said that, Matt has volunteered to read the poem for us tonight, so I'm going to put that up on the screen so everyone can follow along, and let me know when you guys see that.
See it?
Okay, and I'm going to slide back to the beginning. And you can also see a couple of my fingers because I scanned this from a book. All right, when you're ready.
All right. The Turn of the Tide by C.S. Lewis. Breathless was the air over Bethlehem, black and bare, where the fields hard as granite the clods. Hedges stiff with ice, the sedge and the vice of the pool like pointed iron rods. And the deathly stillness spread from Bethlehem, it was shed, wider each moment on the land. Through rampart and wall, into camp and into hall stole the hush, all tongues were at a stand. At the procurator's feast the jocular freedman ceased, his story and gaped, all were glum. Travelers at their beer in a tavern turned to hear the landlord, their oracle was dumb. But the silence flowed forth to the islands and the north, and smoothed the unquiet river bars, and leveled out the waves from their reveling, and paved the sea with cold reflected stars. Where the Caesar on Palatine sat at ease to sign, without anger, signatures of death, there stole into his room, and on his soul a gloom, and his pen faltered, and his breath. Then to Carthage and the Gauls, past Parthian the falls of Nile and Mount Amara it crept. The romp and war of beast and swamp and jungle ceased. The forest grew still as though it slept. So it ran about the girth of the planet. From the earth a signal, a warning went out. And away behind the air, her neighbors were aware of change. They were troubled with a doubt. Salamanders in the sun that brandish as they run, tails like the Americas in size, were stunned by it and dazed. Wondering they gazed up at earth, misgiving in their eyes. In houses and sign, Osiarchs divine grew pale and questioned what it meant. Great galactal lords stood back to back with swords, half drawn, awaiting the event. And a whisper among them passed, is this perhaps the last of our story and the glories of our crown? The entropy worked out, the central redoubt abandoned, the world spring running down. And they could speak no more. Weakness overbore even them. They were as flies in a web. In their lethargy, stone dumb, the death had almost come. The tide lay motionless at ebb. Like a stab at that moment, over crab and bowman, over maiden and lion came the shock. Of returning life, the start and burning pang at heart, setting galaxies to tingle and rock. And the lords dared to breathe, and swords were sheathed, and a rustling, a relaxing began. With the rumor and noise of the resuming of joys, on the nerves of the universe it ran. Then pulsing into space with delicate, dulcet pace came a music infinitely small, and clear, but it swelled, and drew nearer and held all worlds in the sharpness of its call. And now divinely deep, and louder with the sweep and quiver of inebriating sound, the vibrant dithyramb shook Libra and the ram, the brains of Aquarius spun round. Such a note as neither throne nor potentate had known since the word first founded the abyss. But this time it was changed into mystery, estranged, a paradox, an ambiguous bliss. Heaven danced to it and burned. Such answer was returned to the hush, the favip, the fear, that earth had sent out, revel, mirth, and shout, descended to her, sphere below sphere. Saturn laughed and lost his latter age's frost. His beard, Niagara-like, unfroze. Monsters in the sun rejoiced. The inconstant one, the unwedded moon, forgot her woes. A shiver of rebirth and deliverance on the earth went gliding, her bonds were released. Into broken light a breeze rippled and woke the seas. In the forest it startled every beast. Capropods fell to dance from Taprobane to France, leprechauns from down to Labrador. In his green Asian dell, the phoenix from his shell burst forth and was the phoenix once more. So death lay in arrest. But at Bethlehem the blessed, nothing greater could be heard than a dry wind in the thorn, the cry of the one newborn, and cattle in stall as they stirred.
Okay. Here we are. Sorry, I lost a moment. And so, Frank, as the one who hasn't just been talking for 5 minutes, would you like to start us off with your thoughts?
Yeah, this is definitely a poem that I didn't appreciate till I started reading it aloud and or enunciating it in my head. I was just kind of going along, and then I noticed that he had an internal rhyme scheme and an end-of-line rhyme scheme, so I had to go back and start over doing it again, and it really started to impress me at that point. And I definitely like how he's pulling in the constellations and the planets as part of this. Is definitely C.S. Lewis's style to do that. I have read analysis of Narnia where they link each one of the stories to one of the planets as they were known in when there was just Earth, the Sun, and then 5 others known. So that part of mythology. So that would have taken it through 2, 3, up through Saturn, I guess. Maybe 6.
So yeah,
yes.
it's was Earth included in that list?
Either Earth or the Moon was included as one of them. Yeah, that it was Moon, not Earth.
The Moon. Okay.
It was an interesting analysis. I've not been able to find it again. That was a long time ago that I found it on the web.
I remember hearing someone talk about that. I think it might even be like in a full book version. And if you're, I have you might try asking Rachel Fulton Brown. I have a feeling she might know. Either she mentioned that, or maybe I'm just thinking this is something she would know about. Yeah, it is interesting to me. Like this definitely fits with what is it? His space trilogy.
Yes.
Yep.
And science fiction. Great. Travel to other planets and incorporating Christianity into it, and so like it fits into his work that way too. But it's also we don't. So we don't think about this aspect a lot, but like, if Christmas is, what we say it is, this, if it was, God, becoming a part of the creation, like, this changes the whole, like, the entire universe. Like, this is a, pretty momentous event. And so, like, of course it's going to, there's going to be ripples of this outward. So it was, yeah, pretty cool in that way. And yeah, the two, let me take a look. Is it it's I'm trying to look at the rhyme. Okay, yeah, so the rhymes are inside. The one line rhymes internally, and then the next line rhymes with the alternating line. So, oh, that's why I'm having trouble. Okay, can I exit that? There we go. Anyway, that'll work a little better for me. Sorry, the way things were arranged on my screen was not quite what I'm used to, and I was getting lost looking at things here. But how about you, Matt? What's your kind of launching point here?
It just struck me as typical Lewis in a lot of respects. Because yeah, you're right. It's God becoming incarnate is a cosmic event. It's from the earthly perspective, it took place in this one specific place at this one specific time that a few people were around to see, but most of us never were. And I love how the poem is looking at more cosmically, where those who know better, at least beings who know more, see what's going on. It starts out narrow at Bethlehem. The hush falls over everything, and then the stars start noticing, the constellations start noticing, the angels and the great cosmic powers of the universe all start noticing what's going on here. And it immediately made me think of the space trilogy, in particular, where, like, it's science fiction, but it's as much fantasy and mythology as it is science fiction at the same time. He's taking the medieval way of looking at the planets, where there's some kind of angel, in charge of each celestial body, or at least for the planets anyway, and applying that to this, like he did in the space trilogy, the Oziarchs, and they're called something different in space trilogy. Something like that, I think. But
Oyarsa.
Oyarsa, yes. But yeah, there was an entity in charge of each planet, and then of course Satan being the one in charge of Earth, that's the reason Earth is silent in that series, of course. But you kind of get the same idea here, that there's something wrong, but something right at the same time. There's something fundamentally changing about the universe here. Nothing since was one line he had in there. The such a node is neither throne nor potentated known since the word first founded the abyss. This is the first time since creation that anything of this scale has happened. And everything in creation is reacting to that. Not just the people nearby on Earth who are only really barely aware of it, but all these mythological beings and so forth are the ones who are really reacting to it the way that it really should be reacted to.
And there is a gentle irony there. The ones on Earth who should have noticed, Herod and his advisors, who thought that they were the cat's meow of Judea, and whatever happened there they knew about, didn't find out for almost 2 years what had happened.
Yeah, they needed foreigners to come and tell them that this had happened right in their midst.
Well, and it's to go back to, like, the evaluating this as science fiction. The one kind of interesting thing: salamanders in the sun that brandish as they run tails like the Americas in size. And most people today think salamander and we think little lizard, but in the mythological sense, salamanders were fire creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and so. But they're on the sun, which is, noticeably larger than Earth, and so they are so massive that their tails are like our entire continents, which is a pretty nice touch there. It I have to say I was a little surprised. I memorized this, but I to simplify things, I copied and pasted it from a website. And as Matt was reading it, I realized the version I was like, wait, maybe I'm misremembering that. And then several things went by, and I'm like, no.
Oh boy.
So the
sorry, we lost you there for a second.
It varies just slightly in a few places. But anyway, that's not terribly important. But I was a little confused for a moment there. But I mean, same basic thing. But I did have to look up a few words here and there. Although one word doesn't really exist. I had to kind of piece it together because capropods I couldn't really find. But like, okay, pods, feet in this context. Capra is goat. So I think that's fawns or satyrs.
Yeah.
But it's also another thing C.S. Lewis does in a few other places. Here, wait, let me see. Okay, Saturn laughed and lost his latter ages frost. The unwitted, the inconstant one, the unwitted moon, and he's also incorporating the Greco-Roman mythology in a way that they are which he kind of does this a little bit in other places, that they are a part of God's creation, and that they are in some way either angels or something of that nature, which also is he does that. He mentioned, he covers all of them in that hideous strength. Yeah.
There's a tradition I've come across a couple of different times, and I'm wondering if it's a modern thing or if it's older. I've not been able to find it older, but it kind of feels like it would be a tradition that Satan's rebellion took a third of the angels. A third of the angels stayed loyal to God, and then the other third tried to stay neutral. And they were cast out, but not to hell. They became the fairies, the gnomes, the dwarves, the leprechauns of myth. And I've just been trying to find that on occasion, and I've never found it too old.
I was sure the one third
Satan's
going to Satan, but as the other 2/3 were stayed in heaven and whatnot. That's the first time I've heard it with that they're the mythological creatures. Interesting.
So yeah, Satan's third is derived from the Bible, because that was, I think that was Revelation, and the dragon came down and swept a third of the stars out of the sky. Right. I think I have heard reference to that idea a few times elsewhere, although I couldn't pin it down right now. Okay. But it's also one thing interesting in this, because it's not just there's this moment, this massive thing happens, but it's not it goes two ways. First, there's this utter silence. Everything is stilled. Everything is deadened to the point where these great interstellar lords are watching this and like, are we done? Is this closing time? And then once that's done, there's this shaking up, and things come alive again, which is, it's almost he's almost wrapping up Easter into this too, I guess you could say, because it death and then not just life again, but life of a new and greater kind. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the church fathers look at this as, like Athanasius, I think in particular, the incarnation is what creates eternal life. I mean, the resurrection is proof of that and evidence of that, and it's a sign of the victory. But the fact that God became man, that very fact is that, man's going to live forever, because Christ is always going to be God, and he's eternal. So from here on out, there is always going to be humanity. There's always going to be, and his eternal life is really our eternal life. So it's really the same thing, in a certain sense. So yeah, even God being born into the world and not destroying it by his presence, by appearing here, is it's a remarkable sign of life in and of itself. That this isn't the end. That he's not done with the creation, but that has a future, and that we can have a future in that with him.
Well, and on the connected, like looking at that a little bit from a slightly different angle, one thing I heard about this a long time ago, but not something I hear people mention very often. But by the fact that the Son of God, second part of the Trinity, became human, came among us, he, like, that's not something he did for a little while and then went back to what he was.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
His humanity is a part of him, remained, like, he eternally changed himself in becoming one of us, and he still is. He is human as we were originally supposed to be, because in the first draft there wasn't supposed to be death at all. Although we never really got to we never really probably will know how quite that was supposed to work. But and then something else, C.S. Lewis says somewhere in Mere Christianity, the fact that God came among us, from our point of view, I'm a person, my mother is a person, my father is a person, and we're different things. But from God's point of view, and which is another way of saying reality, like, if you take the totality of time, if you see it from that way, I'm like, we're part of the same thing. Like, I'm me, and I am, an individual, but at the same time, like, if you take a large enough view, me and my dad, me and my father and my mother, we're the same thing. We're all, very closely connected. And that Jesus came among us, like, it went the whole way, through that tree. It, it's, like it has here. It's this, shockwave, this ripple effect out from him to, to the rest of humanity. And it's good to see people. It's good to see people talk about that in, like, different terms, because it shakes up kind of the way, in different terms that are not heretical, because that's really easy to do. but it shakes up our way of looking at it, and it's yeah, and that's another thing about this one. So
that was something I read today. I wish I could remember who said it. Said, when we talk about Jesus being of same substance with the Father, we think about that's what we think about, but we need to remember that in the incarnation, he became the same substance as man. And instead of looking at our fellow fallen human beings, we need to look to him, who is the example of what we should be.
Yeah, Americans, we tend to be so hyper individualistic. We forget the unity part. But I mean, it's right there, like in every family. It's okay. Yeah, my kids are my flesh and blood, right? And so on up the chain. That's what we are. We're flesh and blood, or more than that, but we're certainly not less than that. And when you look at humanity, you see something similar to God in that there's one substance, but multiple persons who share that same substance. I think that's part of how we're made in God's image. And I mean, sin, of course, messes that up, where we put ourselves at odds with one another for many and various reasons. And modernism messes it up even more, just because we see each other as much more atomized and granular than we're intended to. But the reality is still there underneath. We're all human, and it's not just that's not a category. We're the same family as well. We're the same flesh and blood as well. And yeah, the fact that Jesus takes that on, it just makes it all the more profound. Again, he didn't just like appear as a human, as some other atomized person out there, but as one of us, as part of us. I mean, it changes everything in just ways that we fail to appreciate even as much as we can here, and certainly we'll be appreciating that more when we understand it more. But yeah, as things go, I mean, the incarnation is a mystery. I think a paradox is how they put it in the poem. But yeah, we don't know the mechanics of how that works. We don't know all the details of how that works. We do our best to describe it without being falling into heresy. But it's we don't understand it. But we have eternity ahead of us, so that we can understand it more and understand what it means to us.
Mm-hmm.
Were you about to say something, Frank? Or
No.
Okay. Well, it's also, if to go back directly, more directly to the poem, it's also interesting. And I've seen him do this. I've seen C.S. Lewis do this in other forms. The way he zooms out and then zooms way back in, because he does start at Bethlehem, and he ends back at Bethlehem, and there's these cows over there. And that's kind of where the poem ends. But like, it's Bethlehem, and then this spreads out from there, and then it's just these people at this procurator. I never looked that one up. Some Roman official, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But like these are at this feast, in somewhere in occupied Judea, and people just fell silent. And then at the tavern, and then the seas nearby, smoothed out. And then Caesar, was sitting and signing, death warrants for people he knew nothing about. But it's just like, here, sign these, which is how bureaucracy is going to go. And he had to stop and watch, and then all over the earth, and then from the earth, and then at the end of it, it goes all the way back in. It comes past Saturn and the sun, and where is it? Saturn and the sun and the moon, and all the way back to Earth. And so that zoom in, zoom out, and then zoom back in effect of the poem is also pretty nice. And also the idea of Saturn laughing, because if you're familiar with Greek mythology, he's the cold and stony one, and but he's finally defrosted just a little bit by this shaking of the entire universe, which is also a fun idea.
There's kind of I'm wondering if this is a sideways reference to the end of the book of Jonah. Because at the end, C.S. Lewis talks about the cattle there at the manger, and the ending of Jonah. In this city are so many people that don't know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle.
Wait, See, okay, I know Jonah ends with him. Oh, okay, that's him yell. That's what he says as he's sitting under the vine and yelling about how God has mistreated him. Is that how it ends? Is that it?
He yells up to God that you've mistreated me, and God is saying, "Look, you're upset about this plant. You didn't water the plant. I made the plant grow. I can take it away. You're upset about that. Shouldn't you be upset about these people that were going to die?" So many people that don't know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle. That just also much cattle line from God just always strikes me as funny.
Well, it's it's a little kind of a little. I bet Saint Francis poked at that one at some point. It's like, look, God was worried about the cows too. So so shouldn't we be concerned for animals as our fellow creatures of God? But yeah, and it's I don't. I'm sure this has been talked about a lot by actual Bible scholars. I'm just someone who's read it read it a fair bit. But like, I do wonder if Jonah is incomplete. If like if the story is supposed to go on and we only got up to like point X and something was lost.
Well, there is an old tradition that he never made it back to Jerusalem. That he actually somehow the book did, but there's supposed to be a grave outside of Nineveh marked Jonah. If it's real or a later archaeological forgery, I can't say. I've just something that I've heard about a couple of times, and
that would make him so mad. But let's see. Oh, and also, another thing which echoes C.S. Lewis's other work, and he talks about the pulsing into space with delicate dulcet pace came a music infinitely small and clear, but it swelled and drew near and held all worlds with the sharpness of its call. And the idea that like this change, this message is coming to the universe in the form of this music that is ringing throughout the entire solar system, which is there's a part of the end near the end of Paralandra where he talks about the dance of the all creation, when they celebrate God's greatness, and when things are finally set right for all of us. And it's an amazing it's an amazing picture of just a little bit of what heaven is going to be. And it's a beautiful there's a little echo of that same thing there, and that's kind of that's part of the poem that I really like too. So it seems like it seems like we've covered a fair bit. Frank, are we missing anything you really wanted to talk about here?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, Matt, any last thoughts for you tonight?
Nothing big. I just want to say that I appreciate the imagery with the salamanders in the sun. The fact that they're looking up at the earth. We're always looking up at the sun as we're standing here, but then these great creatures, seeing what's happening, they're actually looking up at earth. Because again, you look up towards God, and suddenly God is there on earth. It's just a very, very neat inversion that he's doing there, I thought.
That's yeah, being able to shift perspective sufficiently like that to realize that from their perspective, they're looking up at us, which reminds me a little bit of Orson Scott Card, something from Orson Scott Cards. But yeah, being able to shift yourself really into a very alien point of view is good. Is a good skill in terms of like creativity and art. Okay,
and that too is a sorry there, but that too is a Out of the Silent Planet reference. When Ransom, he's not convinced that they're talking about Earth when they keep calling it the Silent Planet, so they show him through a telescope, and he doesn't recognize it at first because it's flipped upside down from his perspective. And then suddenly it clicks, and he's like, "Yeah, that's where I come from."
Oh darn! It was me they were talking about. It's what is it? So I'm also remembering some of the things he does throughout that series, because he says like what is it? Malacandra, Mars was damaged, was basically, or kind of vandalized, you could say, and then Satan did even worse here on Earth, and if he was not thwarted, he would do something much worse with Paralandra, with Venus,
right?
And so the Martians, and to use our terminology, as creatures, they were unfallen, although their world had been damaged, and even simple biological creatures like us, the idea of meeting with someone who not fallen, not corrupted by sin, that's kind of scary. Like, even if they weren't even if it wasn't an angel who could wipe me out of existence, with a thought, like just standing before someone who is not of the same kind, who is not damaged and warped like me, I'm like it's like embarrassment is just like the tiniest shred of what I would like why am I even here? I'm sorry, you shouldn't have to look at me.
Yeah, there's embarrassment, there's shame, there's envy. I mean, like, all those things be immediately triggered the second you're next to somebody like that. It would be such a reminder of how far we ourselves have fallen, but seeing anything perfect like that.
Well, I just realized, I wonder how much that is like, okay, in the Bible, whenever angels show up, the first thing they always say is don't be afraid. Because our natural reaction to them would be fear. And also I realized it's not just because they're powerful, it's because they are of that kind. They are, oh, I just realized what a complete mess I am. I just realized what a complete disaster I am. I'm sorry I exist in front of you. I'm sorry you have to be near me. And that's, yeah. I had never put that together with the appearance of angels in the Bible. So okay. Well, I think we've covered most of what we wanted to say about this poem tonight and other parts of C.S. Lewis. So thank you both for joining me tonight. For those of you watching, thank you for watching, and I hope you found this all interesting. And God be with you.